There was two primary reasons. The first one was personal. I always wanted to own my own business. The whatever creative stuff I had to do, I could do it. And the second thing was from a service perspective, was that I worked in HR mostly in large companies, but I also saw that in the public sector and in the charitable sector, there were a lot of small, medium-sized companies that could use a lot of the advanced HR knowledge that big companies had, but they couldn't afford. So setting up a company with a focus on these small, medium companies was my way of giving them high-level HR knowledge, taking that knowledge and making it specific for the individual organization, because most of these things been done by big companies that really don't always fit for small companies. So tailor-made was definitely the way to go. Have very competent staff to do it with, and making sure they stayed competent. Those are the three major things I wanted. And lastly was to make sure that I created a company that would outlast me. And I'm glad and happy to say that it has. In 1967, when I started out, the word HR wasn't even around. But as time went by, the workplace has become so much more complex in terms of laws, culture, expectation. Keep in mind, the expectation back in the 60s was, I just need a job. Once the scare of the war was over, the expectation became very different. They wanted a job where they could be respected, where they could be treated properly, and so on and so on. So all that made things very complex, both from a legal perspective and as a relationship perspective. And so the biggest change basically is that it's now a regulated profession. It is now at the executive table in most instances. It is now a leader in making sure that the connection to community and what it can provide to community is there, and it's a positive thing for the organization they work for. So it's far more complex than anything else. You got to be a bit of a social worker, a psychiatrist, a lawyer, and a few other things in order to make HR really function these days. Yeah, it hasn't really been an issue for two reasons primarily. It's that when I first started out, I was physically quite capable. All I really had was a limp, so it didn't upset too many people, especially when I started working for government, where a lot of the new employees were war veterans. I wasn't treated the same, but it wasn't a shock for people to see people with disabilities. And the second reason why it wasn't an issue is my own attitude towards it. I just totally not paid any attention to it, whether I got insults or whether I got anything else, which did happen. I never took it personally. My second year in Canada, my aunt enrolled me in a camp for what they call the crippled children camp up in Blue Mountain, and the counselors made us do everything like any able-bodied person. They just basically drummed into us that the only people who hold us back was ourselves, until I got to be 60 years old. Then ageism came in, and that had nothing to do with disability. I'm just too old. I think maybe it's changing a little bit, but at some point, the basic, instead of looking at you as an individual, this is where systemic racism and discrimination works against everybody, because there's certain assumptions made. And for example, 65 today is total nonsense for a retirement age in terms of physical ability for most people. But this has been drummed into our brain so much that 65 is old. Plus, all the reminders, old age pension, old this, old that, it's always 65. And so anytime you get close to that, everybody says, oh my God, I said, no, then I would say, well, you realize that most people, even young people in today's market, 2 or 3 years is a long time. People there, retention isn't so great if you don't do these things. People are going to leave anyway because they want more money, because better career, or they get treated better. They're not afraid to leave these days.
Yeah.
You know, I said, so thinking a guy's too old at 60 because you won't be able to keep him for 10, 15 years, it's a fool's criteria, because you're not going to keep them that long. And actually keeping somebody 60 years old for 2, 3 more years with that experience and that ability, it can enrich your workplace so much that you'd be almost a fool not to hire them.
Yeah.
But this is where the mindset, the stereotyping of people interferes with sound decisions. And it impacts every minority group because it's a stereotypical idea of what this person represents that gets in the way of making sound decisions and giving these people opportunities to show what it can do. I look at, I don't know, I tend to want to read things that are current. So I've been reading, in fact, I just finished reading, and I think it's a great thing for anybody to read. 21 things you may not know about the Indian Act. I recommend anybody who wants to understand what else going on, because it is the most brutal piece of legislation in terms of how they're I mean, it makes you really understand where the indigenous people are coming from. And the next time we'll read another book called Five Little Indians from Michelle Wood, just receive a prize for this book. And I guess it describes what their lives are like and what happens to them and so on. The environment has also been of interest to me lately, because from an economic perspective and therefore an HR perspective. Bill Gates, How to Avoid Climate Disaster. One I just finished too was a book by Mark Carney called Values, which is interesting because he's showing how the monetary policies can be a huge help in convincing people to get away from fossil fuels and all the other stuff that we're doing that's creating problems in the environment. And I can't say that they're most easy read I've had in the year, but it really makes you think about that. I don't believe that there's no such thing as that you're too old to learn, because as long as you're alive, you have an opportunity to become a better person, and be a waste if you don't take advantage of it.